What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're back with another episode of Poker Hands, and we're going to be looking at a large pot play between Tom Dwan and Eli Elezra.
Chop Chewy. You did the ace-queen trick, and then
Believe
Tom
me, you
Dwan.
should have seen what they were chop sueying us with.
They did the chop suey on you guys?
We were throwing a party.
I like the idea of having so many stacks that you have like a stack for the black, a stack for the... It's nice, you know? It looks good.
I don't think I've ever had anywhere near this quantity of chips in front of me while being down money.
Oh, you're stuck right now?
I'm down like 130,000, yeah.
Holy sickness.
I don't think I've ever had half this many chips in front of me while being down money. You know, like I've had more money in front of me and been down money, but it's been in like higher denomination chips.
Eli Elezra. Somebody rattled his cage.
Elezra quietly re-raising with pocket nines.
16,300.
I was gonna call the 37.
Back over to Dwan's 10-4 suited.
So I can get rid of some of them stacks. Is it okay if I call them black chips?
And he'll call an extra
I
12,600.
think I'm going to be sick if the flop connects and I'm not there. But I'm just not going to see the flop.
You're gonna see the flop.
You know, we normally have some kind of suspect pre-flop play on Poker Hands, but we're taking it to a whole new level in today's episode with Gabe Kaplan kicking it off with a limp in the hijack with 5 deuce off. Gabe, how about you save yourself $600 and maybe let this guy go? Over to Durrrr in the cutoff, he now decides to raise it up with 10-4 of clubs, way too loose to isolate a hijack limp. That said, if your opponent is apparently limping only bad, shitty hands, it starts to look a lot more attractive. Anyway, he bumps it up to about 6 big blinds, and Phil Lock decides to call in the small blind with ace-2 of spades. Now Eli Elezra wakes up in the big blind with pocket nines. In a more traditional multi-handed game, you might consider just flatting here pre-flop because if you get 4-bet, puts nines in a tough spot. That said, I still think 3-betting could be okay because if you get them to fold, you take away the option for there to be overcards on the flop that hurt your chances. However, I think calling is a little bit better in tight lineups. In this spot, given what I'm seeing, I like this 3-bet a lot. You're way ahead of all of the players with your pocket nines, and maybe you can isolate one player heads up. Now Gabe gets out of the way with his shitty offsuit 5 deuce, and Durrrr decides to take a pretty liberal call here with 10-4 suited. In fact, if Durrrr did decide to play this, I think I'd like to see a 4-bet because this hand is about as bad as it gets when you're facing a 3-bet, and when you have a hand like that, you probably want to fold or 4-bet. However, he disagrees and takes the flop. Over to Lock, and despite having a fairly solid hand considering all of the hands we've seen here, he's out of position in the small blind and not really in a good position to take a flop. So we take a heads-up flop here between Eli Elezra and Tom Dwan.
Dwan flops a flush draw.
No comment. I don't want these guys to, you know, read the...
Ellie fires 16,000 into the $37,000 pot. Dwan makes the call, and suddenly we've got almost 70,000 in there.
The flop comes queen, queen 3, and both players flop reasonably good pieces. Ellie can be kind of happy that even though there is an overcard, it's actually a paired overcard, so it's a lot less likely that Tom has a queen. Now, it is possible he could have a hand like ace, queen, king, queen, jack, queen 10 suited, but unlikely, especially given how wide Tom is flatting pre-flop. There are a lot of hands that he beats. So he goes ahead and bets 16,000. I like the play. I like the idea of maybe making some hands like ace, jack, ace 10 either float or fold. You're kind of okay with either, as well as getting value for some flush draws and maybe even a hand with a 3 in it. Over to Tom Dwan, he now has 2 options. He can call or he can raise. I'm kind of a fan of not raising too many hands, if any hands on this flop in position, because if you have a queen, you kind of want to keep them in with their bluffs. And if you don't have a queen, you're going to want to float to take it away on later streets, unless you have some showdown like a pair of sevens or maybe ace-3 suited. Anyway, I like a call here from Tom, and he decides to call. Let's take a turn.
2 pair on the board now makes the flush draw a little less attractive.
$37,100.
Unafraid, Eli fires 37,000 and change. Clearly not giving Dwan credit for a queen or a 3. Or 10s or better for that matter. Long, hard stare from Elezra. And Dwan makes this call.
With the pot already up to $67,000, the turn comes another 3, double pairing the board. Now, double paired boards are weird spots because the value of draws goes down a bunch. If either player has a queen or a 3, then either flush draw is just totally dead. So this card definitely makes the board more static, meaning it's hard for hand strength to change much. Now, I'm not a big fan of what Eli decides to do next. He elects to bet $37,000 on the turn. Here's the problem with that. If your opponent has a hand that you beat, like maybe 10-4 of clubs here, you might just make them fold on the turn, which, sure, you deny some equity, but at the same time, why use pocket nines as a hand to bluff like that? Additionally, if you check and your opponent bets, they could have ace high, they could have a flush draw, they could have floated the flop with a hand like king jack, and now you have a lot more equity when they continue. If you bet and your opponent calls, now you don't know if he has a queen, maybe a 3, or if he's still just floating you. So at some point in Eli's shoes, you're going to have to check, and I'd like to see that be here on the turn. Over to Tom, and I think that he has a pretty clear fold. You know, when you face bets, even if you think your opponent might give up on later streets, you want to get rid of some of your worst hands. In this scenario, a 10-high flush draw is about as bad as it can get. I mean, yeah, I guess he could have some hands like 7-6 of clubs that are worse, but his king-high, jack-high flush draw type hands would have more showdown value and can improve to better pairs. You want to have some hands fold, and I think that 10-4 of clubs is a pretty good place to start. But you know what, guys? We've got a bet, and we've got a call. Let's take a river.
And Dwan bricks the end. Eli's gotta wonder what the heck Dwan's calling him with at this point. Elezra's check might look like an ace high. $72,200.
The river comes an offsuit 5 in a pot of over $140,000, and Elezra has now realized he has made a mistake. The pot is way too big for pocket nines. He's sort of turned them into a bluff, and now he doesn't know where he's at. Well, clearly he has to start this off with a check, which he does. Betting would be, I don't even really know if it's a bluff or a value bet at that point, but betting would be suicidal. Now, over to Tom, he has a very clear decision. if you call the turn with this hand, you're calling it to do one thing: represent that queen on the river. And frankly, it's kind of unlikely that Elezra has a queen, because he would have to check the river, and he would have to bet flop and the turn with it. And additionally, he has to have a queen at 3 bets pre. So maybe ace queen, maybe king queen, but not many queens in that range. It's also totally possible he has a hand like ace king or ace jack, or aces or kings or jacks, or really tens, I guess, or maybe even eights, given the way this hand played out. So he has very few queens compared to how many Tom can have. So Durrrr decides to bet 72,000, and now back over to Elezra. And if I'm Elezra, and I'm thinking about how I should try and call here on the river, I think it's really important to try, well, first off, not play your nines like this. But if you're going to play hands like this, you really don't want to have a hand that has a club or a heart in it. Because if you have either of those cards, particularly a club, you now make it harder for your opponent to have a flush draw that was floating you to bluff later. That makes these nines not a great hand to go for the check call. But you also have to understand this. When you play against these loose people that are constantly taking flops and floating you all over the place, sometimes you just got to put your foot down and let them know you're not going to get pushed around.
Down goes the winner.
Or you just keep letting yourself get pushed around. Thanks for joining me here today for Poker Hands. Show me a little love. Hit that subscribe button.